I 32F, got married 8 months ago after being in a relationship for 4 years. Everyone attended the wedding except my parents and my sister Madeline, 30F. I wasn't particularly surprised about my sister's absence since we've never really gotten along, but my parents' decision not to attend was shocking, even though I probably should have seen it coming given our history. Let me provide some context about our family dynamics. My parents have always favored my sister over me, and I can't entirely blame them. She's excelled at pretty much everything throughout her life. From the moment she could walk, she was the star of every room she entered. During elementary school, she won every spelling bee, science fair, and talent show. High school was more of the same, class president, valedictorian, prom queen. She's conventionally attractive, tall, slim, and striking enough that she did some modeling during college before focusing on her business degree. I still remember when she landed her first modeling gig during her sophomore year. My parents threw a huge party to celebrate, inviting all our relatives and her friends. They framed her first professional headshot and hung it in our living room, right above the fireplace where it still sits today. When I graduated with my computer science degree that same year, they simply said, "Good job," and went back to planning Madeline's next photo shoot. Right after graduation, she landed a position at a prestigious firm and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. At 30, she's already a senior executive, complete with corner office and company car. Meanwhile, I work as a mid-level software developer at a decent tech company. It's a good job, and I'm proud of what I do, but it's not the kind of career that makes parents brag at family gatherings. I'm also shorter and heavier than my sister. Growing up, my mother constantly put me on diets, signed me up for exercise classes I didn't want to take, and made not-so-subtle comments about my appearance. "Madeline never has trouble with her weight," she'd say, or, "If you just tried a little harder, you could look as nice as your sister." By high school, I'd learned to tune out these comments, but they still left their mark. I've come to terms with these differences over the years. It used to hurt that my parents never showed the same pride in my achievements as they did in Madeline's, but I eventually accepted it. What choice did I have? I spent years trying to earn their approval, joining clubs they suggested, taking classes they recommended, even briefly attempting modeling myself, which was a disaster that my sister never lets me forget. But nothing was ever good enough. They were obsessed with my sister's accomplishments, and I was just the other daughter. At some point in my mid-20s, I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on building my own life, advancing in my career on my own terms, and developing relationships with people who valued me for who I am. Honestly, things got much better after that. I maintained surface-level contact with my parents to avoid drama, knowing they were always conscious about keeping up appearances. We'd meet for obligatory holiday dinners and occasional family events, where I'd smile and nod while they gushed about Madeline's latest promotion or boyfriend or vacation home. They didn't seem to mind my emotional distance since they had Madeline to dote on. Then I met my husband through a mutual friend at a tech conference. Unlike my family, he really saw me, from the start. He appreciated my dry sense of humor, my coding skills, and yes, even my body type. He never once compared me to anyone else or suggested I should change. After 4 years of dating, he proposed during a quiet moment at home, just the two of us with takeout and our favorite show playing in the background. It was perfect. When I got engaged last year, I naturally informed my parents. Their reaction should have been my first warning sign. Instead of congratulations, there was just silence. Then my mother asked if I was sure I wanted to rush into this, and suggested I might want to get in better shape before the wedding. My father barely said anything at all. My husband noticed their strange reaction during the engagement party, something I was too nervous to fully process at the time. They spent most of the evening in a corner, hunched over my mother's phone. Later, my husband told me he'd overheard them on the phone with Madeline, who was apparently crying. He caught fragments of their conversation, something about how this wasn't the plan, and how they never expected Rebecca to get married first. The wedding planning process was a series of subtle disappointments. My mother, who had already created multiple wedding Pinterest boards for Madeline, despite her not being engaged at the time, showed no interest in helping me choose a venue or dress. When I found my dress, a simple but elegant A-line gown that made me feel beautiful, my mother's only comment was that it was practical and suitable for my figure. I ended up doing most of the planning with my future mother-in-law, who treated me like the daughter she never had. I sent both electronic and physical wedding invitations, meticulously checking and double-checking the guest list with my husband to ensure no one was forgotten. The electronic invitations had red receipts, so I know my parents received theirs. When I noticed they hadn't RSVP'd, I tried calling, texting, and emailing multiple times. They either ignored my messages or replied with vague excuses about being very busy and needing to check their schedules. I had my hands full with wedding preparations, so I couldn't spend too much energy worrying about it. My in-laws were wonderfully supportive, helping with everything from flower arrangements to seating charts. My husband's sister even threw me a beautiful bridal shower, where the absence of my own family was painfully obvious but never mentioned. The wedding day itself was lovely, despite my parents' absence. We had a morning ceremony in a garden venue, followed by a relaxed afternoon reception. Everyone commented on how happy and in love we looked, and they were right. But there were moments, like during the father-daughter dance I didn't have, or when I saw the empty seats in the front row, when their absence felt like a physical ache. After the wedding and honeymoon, I needed answers. When I finally got through to them on the phone, they claimed they were deeply hurt because they never received a formal invitation. My mother went on a long tirade about how inconsiderate I was, how she had always dreamed of helping plan her daughter's weddings, and how she couldn't believe I would exclude them from such an important day. This confused me because I knew for certain we had sent them both types of invitations. When I checked our records during the call, I confirmed that we had definitely sent them. We even had the delivery confirmation for the physical invitation. They were trying to gaslight me, but I didn't confront them about it. I simply apologized for the mistake and ended the call. My husband later pointed out several instances that made their true motives clear. Like how they seemed stunned rather than happy when we announced our engagement, or how they kept making excuses to avoid helping with wedding preparations. He hadn't mentioned these observations earlier because he didn't want to add to my stress during wedding planning. But looking back, the pattern was obvious. They couldn't handle the fact that I, the less successful daughter, was getting married before their precious Madeline. Their attitude only confirmed what I'd always known but tried to deny, that in their eyes, I would never measure up to my sister. The saddest part was realizing that even my wedding day, which should have been about celebrating love and new beginnings, became another battlefield in their ongoing campaign to maintain their perfect family image, with Madeline at the center. Recently, I heard through family members that Madeline got engaged to someone she's been dating for a year. My parents are apparently planning an extravagant wedding for her, speaking openly about their excitement in family group chats I'm not part of. They're already bragging about booking exclusive venues and designer dresses, with my mother accompanying Madeline to private fittings at high-end boutiques, all the mother-daughter moments I was denied. What's interesting is that many of our relatives are now declining to attend Madeline's engagement party and wedding. It seems my parents' behavior at my wedding became something of a talking point in family circles. When relatives ask why my parents skipped my wedding, I simply tell them what I believe to be true, that they couldn't handle me getting married before their favorite daughter. I don't embellish or seek sympathy, I just state the facts as I understand them. A few days ago, my parents contacted me, accusing me of deliberately trying to ruin Madeline's wedding. They claim that the relatives they've spoken to are making excuses not to attend any of her wedding events. My sister vented to a cousin, who told her that people are hesitant to attend because they've heard about how my parents treated me. My parents insist I'm spreading malicious rumors because I'm jealous of my sister's upcoming grand wedding. But here's the thing, I'm just telling people what actually happened. If the truth makes them look bad, maybe they should reflect on their actions rather than trying to blame me for the consequences. The situation continues to evolve, and I'm finding it increasingly difficult to maintain any pretense of a relationship with my parents. Their actions around my wedding finally showed me that no matter what I do, I'll never be enough for them. The hardest part isn't even their absence from my wedding anymore, it's accepting that the loving, supportive parents I always wanted never really existed. I'll update if anything significant changes, but for now, I'm focusing on building a life with someone who truly values me for who I am. Update 1, it's been 2 weeks since my last post, and a lot has happened. After reading your supportive comments, I finally decided to confront my parents directly about their behavior at my wedding and their recent accusations about me ruining my sister's big day. When they started bombarding me with texts about their damaged reputation in the family, I decided it was time to lay everything out on the table. During our phone conversation, my parents immediately launched into accusations, claiming I had orchestrated this whole situation because I was jealous of Madeline. Instead of defending myself as I usually would, I did something I've never done before. I agreed with them, but not in the way they expected. I told them, "You're right. I am jealous. Not of Madeline's success, not of her looks, not of her career. I'm jealous of the unconditional love and support you've given her, something you never even tried to give me." The line went quiet for a moment. Then my mother started saying how I was being dramatic, how they had always treated us equally. That's when something inside me broke. Years of suppressed feelings came pouring out. I told them about every birthday where my achievements were overshadowed by Madeline's latest accomplishment. About the time my mother canceled my high school graduation dinner because Madeline had a modeling callback. About how they spent more on her prom dress than they did on my entire college textbook budget for a year. My father tried to interrupt, saying I was exaggerating, but I kept going. I described how it felt to watch them plan my sister's hypothetical wedding for years while showing zero interest in my actual wedding. I told them about the pain of seeing empty chairs where my parents should have been, and how my mother-in-law had to step in to help me with everything from dress shopping to wedding planning. Their response was telling. Instead of acknowledging any of my points, they turned it around on me. "If you felt this way, why didn't you ever say anything?" my mother demanded, as if I hadn't spent years trying to communicate with them. My father added that I was being unfair and vindictive by sharing these feelings with our relatives. That's when my mother said something that finally made everything crystal clear. She said, "We always knew you were insecure about Madeline's success, but we never thought you'd stoop so low as to try to ruin her wedding out of spite. We raised you better than this." I realized they weren't even hearing me. In their minds, this whole situation wasn't about their actions or my feelings, it was about how it affected Madeline. Even in this conversation about their absence from my wedding, they were more concerned about her upcoming wedding than the pain they'd caused me. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to smooth things over. I didn't apologize or backtrack. Instead, I told them exactly what I thought. "You're right about one thing, you did raise me. You raised me to believe I would never be good enough, that my achievements would never matter as much as Madeline's, that my feelings were less important than maintaining your perfect family image. But you also taught me something you didn't intend to, that I deserve better than this." There was a long silence before my father spoke. His words were calm but cold. "Since you've already decided we're such terrible parents, and you clearly enjoy watching us suffer, maybe it's time we stop pretending. We thought you would help fix this situation because you're family, but obviously, you've chosen your path." My mother added the final blow. "We always tried to treat you both equally, but maybe you just couldn't handle not being the center of attention. That's not our fault, Rebecca. You chose to make yourself the victim." I didn't argue. What would be the point? They had just proven everything I'd been saying. Even in this final conversation, they couldn't acknowledge their role in any of this. I simply said, "Goodbye," and hung up. After the call, I felt something I didn't expect: relief. Yes, there were tears, but they weren't the desperate, heartbroken tears of my childhood. They were tears of release. For the first time, I had said everything I needed to say, without filtering or apologizing for my feelings. My husband found me on our back porch later, staring at the sunset. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and held my hand. After a while, I told him, "They're never going to change, are they?" He squeezed my hand and replied, "No, but you have. And that's what matters." He's right. I have changed. The little girl who desperately sought her parents' approval is gone. The woman who emerged from that final conversation doesn't need their validation anymore. It hurts to accept that my parents will never be who I needed them to be, but it hurts less than continuing to hope they'll change. I don't know what happens next with my sister's wedding or the family drama, but for the first time, I truly don't care. I've said my piece, and whatever happens now is their problem to deal with. The strangest part? I feel lighter. Like I've finally put down a weight I've been carrying my whole life. It's not the happy ending I once dreamed of with my parents, but maybe it's the ending I needed, the freedom to stop trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Update 2. It's been 3 days since my confrontation with our parents, and the situation has taken an unexpected turn. Madeline decided to insert herself into the drama, but her approach backfired spectacularly. Yesterday morning, I received a carefully crafted message from my sister. Her text was dripping with that condescending tone she's perfected over the years. What you said to mom and dad was completely out of line. They've given us everything, supported us through every phase of our lives. You can't just turn around and accuse them of being bad parents because you're feeling insecure about your life choices. The message continued with her usual mix of subtle digs and moral superiority. I know your wedding wasn't exactly what you dreamed of, but that's no reason to try to ruin mine. Some of us have worked hard to achieve certain standards, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a celebration that reflects that. Not everything has to be a competition, Rebecca. I didn't bother responding. After years of dealing with her manipulative behavior, I've learned that engaging only gives her more ammunition. Instead, I simply blocked her number. I thought that would be the end of it, but Madeline has never been one to accept being ignored. A few hours later, my husband called me at work, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Apparently, unable to reach me directly, Madeline had tracked down his personal number, likely through some mutual acquaintance, and sent him a series of messages that revealed exactly why we've never had a healthy sister relationship. Her first message to him started professionally enough. As Rebecca's sister and someone who cares deeply about our family's well-being, I feel compelled to reach out. But it quickly devolved into her true intentions. She told my husband that as the new man in Rebecca's life, he had a responsibility to guide her toward more appropriate behavior. The messages got progressively more condescending. She explained to my husband, a successful software architect with an MBA, that family dynamics are complex, and that someone with Rebecca's sensitivity might not understand the bigger picture. She suggested that he should help Rebecca see reason before she damages family relationships beyond repair. But the real kicker was her attempt to appeal to what she assumed were his social climbing instincts. She actually wrote, "Surely you understand that maintaining good relationships with successful family members like myself could be beneficial for your future. Rebecca's behavior is only hurting her own prospects and, by extension, yours." My husband, who has always seen through Madeline's facade, found her attempted manipulation hilarious. He especially enjoyed her assumption that he would somehow be impressed by her corporate status or swayed by promises of networking opportunities. As he put it, she really doesn't know me at all, does she? When I got home that evening, we went through the messages together. Instead of feeling hurt or angry, I found myself laughing alongside my husband. There was something freeing about seeing Madeline's manipulative tactics laid bare, especially when directed at someone who was completely immune to them. This incident made me realize something important about my sister. Despite all her success and accomplishments, she's still that insecure teenager who needs to put others down to feel superior. The fact that she thought she could manipulate my husband into controlling me shows just how little she understands about healthy relationships. The most revealing part was how quickly she resorted to trying to use my husband against me when her direct approach failed. It's exactly what she used to do in high school. When she couldn't bully me directly, she'd try to turn my friends against me. Same tactics, different decade. Looking back at our childhood with this new perspective, I can see how Madeline's behavior wasn't just about sibling rivalry. She actively worked to maintain her position as the favorite child, constantly reminding our parents, and me, of how much better she was. Every time I achieved something, she had to overshadow it. Every time I made a friend, she had to point out my flaws to them. What's different now is my reaction to her games. 10 years ago, her messages would have sent me into a spiral of self-doubt. 5 years ago, I would have been angry and hurt. Today, I'm just tired of the drama and slightly amused by her transparent attempts at manipulation. My husband's reaction was perfect. Instead of getting drawn into her drama, he simply replied with, "Thank you for your concern about Rebecca's well-being." As her husband, I'm focused on supporting her happiness, not managing her behavior. I think it's best if you direct any future concerns to Rebecca directly. Have a nice day. When Madeline didn't get the response she wanted, she sent one final message: "I see she's poisoned you against the family too. Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces." The irony is that by trying to help, Madeline has only reinforced my decision to distance myself from my family's toxic dynamics. Her messages to my husband proved that nothing has changed. She's still the same manipulative person who needs to control every narrative, who sees any deviation from her perfect family script as a threat. Perhaps the most satisfying part of this whole situation is knowing that her attempts at manipulation failed so completely. Not only did she fail to drive a wedge between my husband and me, but she actually brought us closer together. We spent the evening making jokes about her messages and planning a weekend getaway, completely unbothered by her threats of social consequences. I've realized that true family isn't about maintaining appearances or controlling narratives. It's about supporting each other, laughing together, and standing united against manipulation attempts, even when they come from your own sister. As for Madeline's wedding drama, I'm more convinced than ever that I'm better off watching it unfold from a safe distance. My husband and I have decided to focus on building our own happiness rather than getting drawn into my family's endless power plays. They say success is the best revenge, but I'm learning that true success isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about being at peace with your choices and surrounding yourself with people who support your growth rather than trying to control it. By that measure, I feel more successful than ever. Update 3: 2 weeks have passed since my sister's failed attempt to manipulate my husband, and the situation has evolved in unexpected ways. My parents have been frantically trying to salvage their reputation, but their efforts are only making things worse. Through family connections, I learned that my parents have been on a desperate campaign to correct the narrative. They've been calling relatives individually, telling them that I'm spreading vicious lies because I'm jealous of Madeline's dream wedding. According to them, I'm just bitter because her wedding will be so much more elegant and sophisticated than mine was. Their latest story is that I deliberately excluded them from my wedding so I could play the victim. They're claiming I sent their invitation to an old email address and an outdated physical address, which is interesting considering they still live in the same house they've owned for 30 years, and they've had the same email addresses since email became a thing. But here's the beautiful part: their attempts at damage control are backfiring spectacularly. Our relatives aren't buying it. In fact, several family members have come forward with their own stories about my parents' pattern of favoritism over the years. One aunt revealed that my mother pulled similar stunts at family weddings in the past, always trying to make sure Madeline was the center of attention. The most satisfying development is how the extended family has responded to my parents' manipulation. Key family members have withdrawn their support for Madeline's wedding, including some who were supposed to play important roles in the ceremony. Their exclusive venue, which was secured through family connections, might no longer be available. Even the designer dress boutique owned by a family friend has suddenly developed scheduling conflicts. Last weekend, things came to a head at a family gathering. My mother apparently made a scene when someone innocently asked about my wedding photos. She launched into a defensive monologue about how I had changed since getting married and was trying to tear the family apart out of jealousy. Her outburst backfired, shocking several relatives who hadn't known about the situation and further damaging their carefully maintained image. What's particularly ironic is that my parents' desperate attempts to preserve their perfect family facade are what's destroying it. Every time they try to explain away their absence from my wedding, they end up revealing more about their true nature. The more they try to paint me as the villain, the more people see through their manipulation. Family members who had previously stayed neutral are now taking sides. Even my father's brother, who had always remained quiet to keep the peace, recently reached out to apologize for not speaking up sooner about their treatment of me. He and his family have decided not to attend any of Madeline's wedding events. I haven't responded to any of this directly. I don't need to. The truth is doing all the work for me. Every time my parents or Madeline try to spin the situation, they end up exposing more of their toxic behavior. All those years of keeping quiet, of accepting their treatment to keep the peace, it turns out peace was just another word for enabling their behavior. My husband summed it up perfectly: they spent years building a facade of the perfect family, but they built it on a foundation of favoritism and emotional manipulation. It was bound to crumble eventually. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. The weight of trying to earn my parents' approval is gone. The anxiety of managing Madeline's feelings has lifted. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about maintaining their perfect family image. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you do, it's simply letting the truth speak for itself. Thank you, Reddit, for helping me find the strength to stand up for myself. Your support and advice through this journey have meant more than you know. Sometimes it takes strangers on the internet to show you what real family support looks like.